morning and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines and the stories that make New Haven tick. The story that is making New Haven tick and the country tick. It's an uprising against police violence against African Americans in our nation. And today we're going to talk about what is going on, what's going to happen next, what does it all mean, with one of New Haven's leading political thinkers, the Reverend Samuel T. Ross Lee of Community Baptist Church. Good morning, Reverend Ross Lee. How are you?
Emmanuel Baptist Church.
Did I say it wrong? I apologize.
You said community.
Oh boy, that does make a difference. Okay,
That makes a difference.
Emmanuel Baptist Church, and you're looking well. You've been staying healthy under COVID-19.
As healthy as possible, I guess.
All right. I'm glad to hear that. So what's your personal reactions? It's been a fast moving story, a protest movement like we might not have seen in our lifetimes. You and I I guess I was born in the early days, this middle days of civil rights movement, but I was too young to participate. What was your reaction, Reverend Ross Lee, when the news broke about what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis? How did that affect you personally?
Not surprised. I saw the video, partially. Quite frankly, I have stopped watching those kind of videos. I am tired of seeing black bodies shot, killed, drugged through the streets. I don't want to be desensitized to it. So I didn't watch it as much as they put it on the air. And business as usual, quite frankly. It of course affects people are talking about things like how this particular thing affects you. We haven't gotten over Emmett Till. We haven't gotten over the Scottsboro boys. We haven't gotten over Tenney, the 14-year-old kid in South Carolina that they executed. So all of that stuff is still here. It's still with us as African American people who are aware of these histories. And we're not shocked because we know of a whole lot of other stories and a whole lot of other circumstances that don't make media, that happened before social media and camera phones and all that kind of stuff, personally in our families. And we see people now in these situations who are being killed and dehumanized in so many ways that look like brothers and sisters and cousins and aunties and whatever in our families. So the brazenness of this, that they saw the camera phones on them. They saw the people around them. And they
didn't even seem out of. He didn't even seem out of control.
He did not seem out of control. He did not
seem very in control.
He was concerned about what was happening around him or what he was doing. That suggests to me that his behavior is a part of his psyche. It's a part of his spirit. I don't mean that necessarily in a spiritual, in a religious way. It's a part of who he is. As a police officer, maybe even as a person, just in general. But yeah, that's deeply ingrained in him. And the people who were standing around did not seem stressed at all about it. They did not look like that. They were shocked that they had not seen this before. And I suggested they had seen this before. This police officer had how many, like 17 different citations against him. And I'm sure some of those people who were standing there knew about that and maybe were actually with him.
He's a trainer. He trains the others.
Right. So in that case, he reminds me of a police officer whom I called, or I called the police, and they sent this guy, and the guy who was with him looked like he had just come out of the academy on his way to my place. But the other officer was older. He was the one leading. And he was angry at me.
What did you call about?
I called about a harassment situation on a white woman.
How long ago was this?
About 2-3 years ago.
So a person was harassing you. You called the police.
Yep.
The police came and they were
No,
angry.
this is what I did. I looked up the definition of harassment for Connecticut, the law. And when I found it and saw it, and I said, yeah, this fits the legal definition. I called the police department. A woman answered the phone, and I didn't say I'm being harassed. I said, I told her what was happening. And she said to me, oh, that's harassment. Would you like us to send someone? I said, yes. They sent these 2 police officers, and the older one came, and he was angry at me for having called them. He actually suggested that I should have done something to this woman. He said to me, it was subtle. I don't even know if it's that subtle. He said, but this is what he said. Well, what does a big guy like you need to call the police for a little woman like that? What are you suggesting? What does my size have to do with it? What does her size have to do with it? But what I knew is that if what was going on, and what was going on had been going on for a number of years. It's a person who doesn't live very far from me. And I just kept ignoring. I knew what she was doing, though. I knew she wanted me to just kind of get so annoyed that at one point I would snap. And then she would call the police. There's this black man who was scaring me to death. And then the police come off her call towards me, and I'm immediately a criminal because she called, not because of anything I did. So
Were the officers white?
Well, both of them were white.
Because I mean, the whole history, obviously, of fears of black men and white women, and that being a basis for activity. So how'd that end up?
They actually went to talk to her, and came back and said, she's not going to do it again. What she was doing. The police officer, I had this phone with me, and I had Googled, the information. So I had it on my phone, and I brought it to them when they came down. So he said, I told him what was happening. He goes, that's not harassment. I said, yes, it is. Not only does this say it's harassment, but when I called the police office, they told me it was harassment. So he takes my phone and he starts reading. It was 2 sentences maybe. And he just holds my phone an uncomfortably long time. I think that he wanted me to grab my phone from him. Now he has a reason.
Sounds like he was hostile to you because you were calling about a white woman.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was.
Did she stop?
Oh, yes, she did. And then he told me, I can't remember what exactly had been said, what I said, because I obviously had said something first as they were leaving. Because at this point, I was agitated. I think I said something about, learn the law. And he goes, we are the law. I said, no, you're law enforcement. This is the law, the thing that I was talking about.
Who are the law? Do you happen to remember his name, if you feel comfortable saying who
I
was?
do not remember his name.
All right. Well, your name is Reverend Samuel T. Ross Lee of Emmanuel Baptist Church, and you're here on WNHH's Dateline New Haven, 103.5 FM live stream in newhaven.org. So as you pointed out, Reverend Ross Lee, this goes back well before Emmett Till. There have always been images that got the imagination. The picture, I believe, was the cover of Ebony or Jet, was the funeral of Emmett Till.
Yeah,
and then
I know Jet did it. I don't know if Ebony did.
The video of Rodney King, but now we're hit by a lot. I hear from African Americans, we don't continually watch it because that becomes a new form of just, of trauma. But for the rest of the country that's not Black, each one is a wake-up call sometimes. Why is this so different? Why has this created the largest movement for change in policing in our lifetime? Was it just a tipping point that we just couldn't take one more while we're all bottled home with COVID-19? Or was it rat-tat-tat with the 3 latest beyond in the other cases? What's going on right now in our country?
Well, when you continually do something that is horrible, no one knows what thing is going to break the camel's back, as we say. Maybe this was the one. And I think we can point out a number of things. I don't know that we can say definitively that this is the thing. Maybe watching the video of this guy calmly putting his knee in somebody's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
It is something to me that all the people who usually explain away acts of police misconduct really aren't trying to explain this one away. It's really odd,
Um,
except for Candace Owen. I haven't heard anyone. Usually there's an excuse that's made. And people who are really very hostile to civil rights are all coming out saying this is terrible. And police chiefs in, almost all white towns where there have been issues, they've come out and marched with the protesters. Why is that happening?
well, like I say, we don't know exactly why this one became the thing, but eventually this one was going to happen in terms of how people react to it. Eventually, it had to happen, and to say, for anyone to just try to sit there and say this is the reason, because you can't get inside the heads and the minds and the hearts and the spirits of all of these people who reacted in the way they have, and not just in the country but all over the world. People
It
are
is amazing to me to see, and this is a question that comes from Bob McCormick. Thanks for listening, Bob. The Minneapolis Council, a majority, veto proof majority, has now come out for dismantling the police department and
yes,
creating with the community a new version of public safety. The cry in
yes.
New Haven, we had some wonderful rallies here in New Haven. And the
Hmm.
cry here is coming largely from younger people, but not only, is abolish the police. And for most people, not all, it doesn't mean have no one respond to it, not one call to arrest someone who shoots someone or holding someone hostage, or yesterday in Fairhaven, driving into it, pointing a rifle at a street worker and then driving into a house and on fire. But what do you think about this call to get 3/4 of the police budget removed and to phase out the existence of the New Haven Police Department?
um, the defunding argument is strong from my perspective. um, my daughter, just finished her high school work, so all except the shouting, she's a high school graduate,
Mhm.
and I'm happy about that. I'm happy about that on more than one level. I'm happy that she doesn't have to walk into buildings with people with guns. So I think that defunding piece of taking these police officers out of schools and giving that money to the school system to actually educate children, to actually give counseling. I mean, there's so many examples of what happens and what is happening across the world. America talks about this exceptionalism crap as if they can't learn anything from anybody else. There are schools across in other countries that have meditation rooms to let kids just go in and meditate and calm down, and yoga, this kind of stuff, things like that. Why can't we do that exactly? Are these people Martians or something, and we are different types of human beings? Um, Instead, we have police officers in our schools. Instead of getting to the roots of some of these kids' problems, we're gonna exacerbate the problem by putting police officers and having police officers snatch. And we've seen what's happened. The police officers snatching little girls around and throwing them on the floor, sixth grade, this kind of stuff. It's gonna traumatize that child for life, because you have some angry police officer who we don't know why he's angry. Maybe he got in an argument with his wife at home or something, but he's coming into a school with children with a gun. So that definitely needs to happen. That the defunding definitely needs to happen. Some of the things that the buying of the military um, paraphernalia,
Well,
the
tanks.
tanks and the AK-4, all this kind of stuff, and and militarizing a bunch of people who were too afraid to be in a military where people are going to be shooting back at them. Okay, so they can walk around a city like a
By the way, I'm afraid of
badass.
that. I'm afraid to go somewhere
Huh?
where people shoot. I'm afraid to go into a
Yeah,
military shooting. I know you were in
right.
the military. Yeah, yeah.
Right, but I was never in war, but I was there, and if war broke out with Reagan in the White House, I could have been. But you're walking around here with all this militarized stuff on in among civilians. What are you proving by that? take that money away. Yes. Now, in terms of the what was the other D? I know dismantle.
Well, they want to get rid of 3/4 of the budget. So would you get rid of? They can't afford walking beats right now. Would you get rid of supplemental walking beats in New Hallville in the summer? Would you get? I mean, what would be left if you got rid of 3/4 of the department?
Well, like I haven't studied this necessarily.
Yeah.
I haven't even heard all of the argument around that, so I can't. I'm not going to approve or disapprove it because I can't do so intelligently.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that there have been police departments that have been dismantled. It happened in Camden, New Jersey, in 2012, and the county police the area. Crime went down. It happened in Compton, California, in 2020, and I think they not 2020, of course, 2000, and in 2010 they voted to bring them back. But you look at so I don't know what happened in terms of the crime during those 10 years, but look at the Camden, New Jersey situation. I'm reading about this, and who am I hearing in my ear? I'm hearing Malcolm X, who says, how is it that you have more police and more crime in the same place? The crime went down when they dismantled the police department in Camden, New Jersey in 2012. What is it about the police being there that makes crime go up?
I think the fundamental question you're very much can be asked and addressed, which is whether policing in New Haven can be reformed. That's the fundamental argument now. So in the 90s, we talked about community policing, and Obama administration, they continued to push this. We've talked about that in New Haven. It's meant different things. Sometimes it means something real, sometimes it doesn't. Get problems when they're small before they're big. Try not to arrest people. Work with other parts of the community to solve the problems. That was sort of the shibboleth of people who want the police to have a better relationship with the community. Then we went to legitimacy policing. So community policing sometimes felt like over policing. What's more important is just the way the cops deal with you every day. If they learn to treat you with respect, explain what they're doing, not do what happened when you called the police with that harassment case, that then people will trust you. That became the latest. And now very quickly, there's a new approach which says you can't reform them, that fundamentally police departments do not exist to protect us. They cannot protect us. They make it worse. So fundamentally, we have to gradually wipe the slate clean, do what you described in Camden. Do we need that in New Haven? Do you think that fundamentally New Haven's police department cannot be reformed? Do you think that fundamentally community policing and other ideas like that will not make us safer and have a good relationship with the community, that we just need to eliminate the police department and build something new?
So again, I can't talk intelligently about that because I don't know all of the information. I don't have enough information to make a decision about whether I should say yes or no on that. But this is what I will say. We can't keep moving the furniture around on the Titanic. And that's what seems to be happening in so many cases, right? Instead of, the word radical means going to the root of a situation. We're not doing that in a lot of situations, in a lot of so-called reform. We're reformists. We're not radical. Radical, you need to get to the root of the issues. You need to look at the whole thing and not just jump in medias res in the middle of the situation and decide, okay, we're going to change this. We're going to change this. How are you quote unquote training police officers? Are you educating police officers, or are you just training them? Okay. Who are you putting on the police force? I don't think people under 25 should be a police officer. I hope I don't get arrested by a 21-year-old when I leave my office, but I just don't think that should be the case.
By the way, I think driving too, and I know this is terrible and it's not legal, but 21-year-old males, I don't think that their brain development, and there is a difference between male and female. I think driving cars, they're dangerous till 25. I realize that's not a realistic law because you have people who are in their teens who need to be working on combines and driving for a living out in rural areas.
Yeah, but
I think similar idea.
if you're saying that people are males less than 25 should not be driving a car. Should they have the weapons of death and destruction and detainment that is
Yeah.
given to them by the state to affect their fellow citizens? Of course not. Okay, so what are we doing? And have we taught them about how policing started in America? What was policing about when it started in America? They were people catching enslaved people who were trying to run away. I don't even like to call them call my ancestors enslaved or slaves. They were hostages. They were kidnapped from their country and held hostage here on plantations. And when they tried to escape the brutality of that reality, you had these poor people who didn't own land, who didn't have power to make decisions, who were not a part of we the people, became the ones who got some kind of status because they had a higher status than the Africans who were enslaved, and they could beat up them and take all their frustrations out on those people. That needs to be taught. They need to understand that. We need to fire people immediately, not just administrative leave where they're still being paid taxpayer money after you violated the taxpayers, right? And then the people who are watching them do this stuff, they need to be moved immediately. If I go out there right now and do some of the things that police officers have done to another citizen, I don't have a union to come and argue for my job. And the fact that these union people do these kinds of things, having seen the same thing we are seeing, you're arguing for a person, a murderer, to keep their job because you want to keep your power as a union president or union rep or whatever the situation. That is a despicable human being as well.
What about due process? I agree with you about the police unions. They've been the number one impediment to accountability for policing in America. I think that's a big consensus in our country. What about due process?
If the police had a video of me holding my knee on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and that person dies, what's going to happen to me?
Arrest.
I'm going to be arrested.
And then you'll have a
put in
trial.
jail, and I'm going to be made to pay some money that I probably don't have to get out. Police officers are sent home. Where's the equity and the equality and the justice in that? So due process for me is going to jail, having to be around other people who are in jail, having to pay a bond that I may not have, or money that or maybe not get no bail at all, and having some time to sit in jail for years before my case is adjudicated. Whereas they get to go home. That's what I say about due process.
All right. And you're listening to Dateline New Haven with the Reverend Samuel T. Ross Lee of Emmanuel Baptist Church. Harry sent us some stuff from Bloomberg about what happened in Camden. Transformation began after the 2012 homicide spike. Police wanted more officers on patrol, but couldn't afford to hire more because of generous union contracts. 2013, the mayor and city council dissolved the local PD, signed an agreement for the county to provide shared service. The county force is double the size of the old ones. Officers almost exclusively patrol the city. They have a union. The more head count has more trust building. Daily non-crisis interactions between residents and cops went up. They also got de-escalation training and body cameras. So that's reform. That's not radical. That's saying we got rid of the union contract. We've got more cops on the street. We did these measures like de-escalation training and body cameras. So that's what people have been calling for years. That was the Obama plan for community policing, improving departments. And the critique we're getting now with the abolition is that won't be enough. That doesn't get to the root of it. You got rid of the police departments. I respect what you're saying, that you don't know enough specifics, neither do I, about how each little part would work out if you did that in New Haven. I do think there's a fundamental question about what police should do. So as you pointed out, things that I think most of America now agrees with, that they should have accountability, at least in theory. People agree that it's terrible there hasn't been accountability. I had an incident where there was no accountability, where they arrested a reporter kept the guy going through 6 months of heck, and oversaw an IA report that found that they broke policy and still excused it. You know, there and people have been really brutalized there. But you know, from that part, there's still this fundamental question of what should police be for? We know historically they were to catch runaway slaves. We know they haven't had the accountability. We know that if you reform, we want them to think differently and act differently and be accountable. But do we need police? Do we need police for anything?
Yes, we need there needs to be some kind of well, let's pull this back. If the police did what they say on their vehicles, protect and serve, and that was not exclusive to particular people, because when African American people look at that statement, and in the African American community, they don't believe they're there to protect or to serve. They believe that they're there to police, harass, arrest, sometimes violate the law in order to do that.
That's a given now. I think we've come to a place suddenly, really quickly, where that's becoming a given, that's the status quo. You're saying you could envision needing a police force that does respond to crime? Because part of the idea of community policing was, instead of responding to that crime, let's invest more money to have more cops get to know people and see little problems to solve them before they get bigger. And now people are saying that's kind of over policing. We don't want so many cops around. So if they could protect and serve, what would you envision a police force doing?
You're gonna, in any human situation, there are gonna be people who do things that they shouldn't do to other people. The police officers should be there for that. You know, any kind of criminal, behavior, they need to be there for that. But here's the problem with the police being there for that. They overreact. They act out of fear. I've seen many of signs, so this is obviously not unique or original to me. But why is it that a citizen, untrained citizen, is supposed to be calm when a police officer has a Glock pointed at them, but a police officer can act out of fear and kill somebody because they felt their lives were in danger, and then you discover that the person was unarmed, this kind of thing. So, so and so is robbing the store. Is that a death penalty?
$20 counterfeit bill, maybe knowing.
Right, an alleged counterfeit bill that turned out not to be a counterfeit bill. But you come in blazing. You come in with all the aggression that you can muster for something like that. What's the point of that? You go to a woman's house, which happens to be the wrong address, with a no-knock warrant. You burst open the door. The boyfriend believes that he and his girlfriend are in danger. He gets his gun registered, licensed. He shoots. He gets arrested and put in jail for attempted murder. You come in there and shoot this woman who is completely innocent. You're at the wrong house, and the person you're looking for is already locked up.
Babz Rawls-Ivy says we certainly can reimagine policing. We certainly can create what we need and want for community policing. Thanks for listening, Babz. Babz used to be on the police commission. Now Tracy Mears is being appointed to the police commission, which I find very interesting, Reverend Russ Lee, because she is a New Haven Yale Law professor, African-American woman who helped advise Obama, who helped the federal government back when our government was enforcing a civil rights law rather than protecting people through civil rights law who violate civil rights. She was helping going around from city to city to figure out how to do policing in a way that protected rights, concentrated on the social networks of people who are most likely to be involved in violence, and try to give them a way out. I'm wondering now that she gets appointed to the police commission, if times are moving so fast past her. So Babz Rawls-Ivy believes we can still community policing, and a younger generation is saying we don't want community policing, we don't want policing. It'll be an interesting debate now to see. I think this is taking a very quick pivot. What do you think is going to impact the presidential race? Because obviously the Republicans are giddy. They're going to say Joe Biden wants to abolish police and keep you unsafe at a moment when the entire country, almost, including evangelical Christians and everybody, is outraged about what happened to George Floyd and unhappy with the White House. Do you think the marketing of this term abolition is going to be
The marketing of
different?
what?
The term abolition by people who don't really want to talk about it. Do you think that's going to be a problem?
I don't know how the term
They're trying to
abolition.
pin the Democrats. They're trying to take the word abolition and not really engage with what the argument is. They're trying
Right.
to scare people and say they're going to leave
Okay.
you vulnerable to crime and abolish all police.
Okay. So I didn't know that was happening already, but hey,
Yeah, the
that's
ads
what
are
these
up. Yeah, yeah.
that's what these machines do. I think the Democrats are going to have to respond in kind, and they're going to have to do it in a very simple way, an easy to understand way. Put your complex explanations and stuff on your website or whatever, but you got to respond, unfortunately, in this country with bumper sticker to bumper sticker. That's the reality. But the police and these commissions and and all this kind of stuff, they really need to go into poor communities and talk to the people who are dealing with these realities every day. I get the theorists. I love the professorial theory and all that kind of stuff, but they really need to go into these communities and talk to people who deal with these realities every day and get their perspective on what they're dealing with.
I'd love to hear more about that in a second. Let me just tell you that Jawan Carter, thanks for listening, Jawan, wrote, defund movement is restructuring and recreate to serve and protect. Okay, that's not long. I think I got that point. Eric Mastriano Sr., thanks for listening. Eric says, how about a periodic evaluation to see if they're still fit for duty like they do with the military? This was Rodney Williams had this idea that, find out if they're burnt. There's been too much
Yeah.
trauma psychology and they're staying on for their pension. Let them get the pension and have a psychological out. What about your congregants? Emmanuel Baptist is one of the and Rebecca Sweeney Goddard. Thank you, Rebecca. She's a retired second generation officer in New Haven, had great relationships in the community. She says, now, principal, it's better hiring practices, better policies, better training for police officers. A better police department is possible with better police officers. New Haven could be a model for that. We miss you in New Haven, Rebecca Sweeney Goddard. Thanks for weighing in. What about your congregants, Reverend Ross Lee? Do you have any sense of where they stand on this question? The great
Oh, by
obsession
all
with
means.
policing, the new
And on the
Haven,
questions of defunding it
or just about the
maybe.
New Haven Police Department? Because isn't it really more complicated on the ground? The very same individual have very mixed feelings about police. They appreciate the individual officers because there are great officers, right? So I'll interview people who really love, like Trent Butler. He loved this Lieutenant Holly Wazalewski. One day Trent had kind of been in an unfortunate situation. He was in a dangerous situation. And he said, I'll give up if Lieutenant Holly comes to the scene. And you have these very mixed feelings about the police officers who you feel have done good things for you, but a police force that hasn't respected you and that you don't feel safe with. Do you have a sense from the grassroots of what people want?
I'm not. I know that my congregation, people in my congregation, are as I am, sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we don't. I don't know that there's this dichotomy of officers and police departments and Hamden and New Haven and this sort of thing. People live all over the place. People move all over the place. I don't know particularly if I have if there are members of Emmanuel who have relatives in Minnesota, um, but I do know they're in South Carolina. I do know that in some of the other places where these things have happened. And I think it's just a general fear, quite frankly, uneasiness towards policing in America. Just in general, policing in America. But let me say this as well. First of all, I think we need to stop talking about police training. I think we need to start talking about police education. As I said on one of your stories on the Independent in the comments section, I was in the military. I went through basic training. I know what training is about in the situations like that. You are trained to react. As a matter of fact, in the military, they have this unofficial thing says yours is not to reason why, yours is just to do or die. Right? They're trained to act. They're not trained. They're not educated to think. We need to start educating police officers and not just training them. Okay. So that's the thing. We also need to stop the narrative of the police officers who have their lives on the line every day. No, they don't. No, they don't. We are justifying this whole fear narrative that you have to be afraid, at every single moment, at every, all the time, and therefore make sure you go home. You go home at the end of the day. How about make sure that the person that you're dealing with goes home at the end of the day? How about making sure that if you're coming with a SWAT team and you're shooting bullets at somebody, and that person has actually shot bullets at somebody? Because when they broke into Breonna Taylor's house, that was for drug dealing. Nobody had suggested that the person that they were looking for had killed people or was shooting people at the moment. You went in there because you thought somebody was dealing drugs out of the house. How does that justify a SWAT team? Who was the judge that signed the no-knock warrant? You got this miasmic culture of people working. The judges are supposed to be the ones who are sitting back and being objective and looking at things, and they're just working with the whole system is working together to criminalize, to kill, to demonize Black people in the Black communities. And those small things add up and they lead to these realities that we end up seeing that has burst on the scenes now, in terms of these marches, these protests all over the world.
Eric Mastriano Sr. says, thank you for your service. Babz says, yes, police education. Harry, this just in. Pelosi, top Democrats unveil police reform bill, Justice and Policing Act. Ban chokeholds like that used against Floyd. Ban no-knock warrants in drug cases. You were just talking about that, Reverend Ross Lee, as was used in the incident leading to the death of Breonna Taylor. Do you have hope in any of this?
What is the no-knock warrant for in the first place? Who does that apply to? Somebody who's holding somebody hostage with a weapon? Or just because you have a suspect in a place? Why do you need a no-knock warrant? Why do you need these things? So we keep reforming, if you will, around the edges, and then only for a little while, and come back and start doing the same kind of stuff all over again because we've convinced some judge, not the public, who said that these things are bad, that it's necessary to go do it again. And it may not, lead to anything the first time, the second time, third time, maybe even the 30th time. But even if it's the 35th time, the 55th time that you go into a house and you shoot and kill Breonna Taylor, it's wrong. It's not just that time, but all of those 54 times before that, it's wrong. So we need to stop this, skimming around the edge. Get to the center of the situation, get to the crux of the matter, get to the root of the problem, and start reforming from that. We need to acknowledge that policing in America is not done properly, it's not done correctly. It is based out of a history that we built upon and we reformed somewhat, but we've never done it correctly. And we need to start doing that.
All right, Reverend Samuel T. Ross Lee on Dateline, New Haven. What's your sense of this protest? Are you hopeful? I was talking to Karen Du Bois Walton and John Lewis. They said they're hopeful because these protests are very inspiring. I went to the one on the highway, and when I saw how young these women were who were leading that protest and what great decisions they made on the fly to keep everybody safe while staying focused on what their message was and communicating that message you're talking about, I was inspired. When you look at how nationally this protest movement has delivered a message so fast with quick results so far. On the other hand, I'm 60 years old and I've developed a cynicism and a weariness that I worry about how fast it can snap back. So,
Exactly, because
so
inspiration
thankfully,
can.
people like me aren't there because we believe things can't be done because we've seen such sad outcomes.
Well, it's not a matter. The reason that we are upset is because we know what can happen, and we know it should happen, and we know it's possible. The fact that it's not happening is why we are upset. Inspiration can be fleeting. Um, we marched before. We marched peacefully before, and we're still here. So, we had the song in the church. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus's blood and righteousness. So I don't just take these Christian notions and throw them around easily. I don't have hope in the police department. I have hope in God. I don't have faith in the police department. I have faith in God. My hope will be, what I'm looking for is concrete, empirical, tangible things happening, actually happening. Not, I don't care about the conversation anymore as a conversation unless something actually comes out of that conversation. I don't care about the marches unless something actually comes out of those marches. I am not inspired unless something actually. I have marched. I marched in college. You remember the Forsyth County situation? I was there. Okay, I marched in Atlanta. I was accosted by police officers in Cambridge when I was in divinity school, and in South Carolina when I lived there. Stopped, a number of times. I want to see specific things happen, and I don't have hope because I know America. America has a short attention span. I believe that there are a lot of people out there marching who will use that for the rest of their lives. You can't call me racist. I marched for George Floyd. Just like people use it for King. I marched for Martin Luther King.
And voted for Obama.
I voted for Obama. Those kind of things. So
Rebecca,
when things happen, that's where my hope is. I'm not throwing it around easily. Like this happened, and I'm hopeful.
Rebecca, Lieutenant Goddard said, "What about policing expert is with actual knowledge of policing? No knock warrants exist, so evidence isn't destroyed." On the point about, I think Reverend Ross Lee said he's not an expert on this. This is our 6th show in a row on a series. We had Lorenzo Boyd, who's a retired law enforcement who runs a law enforcement institute at UNH. We had Shafiq Abdul Sabur, retired officer. So I think your point's well taken that the discussion has many aspects, including nitty gritty about policing. We've tried to include that in these series of shows. I also think that Reverend Ross Lee has an important perspective of someone who is a leading minister in town, very engaged in political issues and where the community is. And I'm trying to get all different perspectives about, and I appreciate the input, Lieutenant Goddard, and your own input there. Babz, Rawls-Ivy, let's not forget MLK was very young, Malcolm was very young, Stokely Carmichael was very young. There's been young people picking up the torch for liberation and freedom. On that note, Reverend Ross Lee, before we leave, do you have a final prayer for our city or our nation?
Well, let me say this about the no knock thing that he brought up. So that if you are breaking into the house of a drug dealer and you're afraid that they're going to the evidence is going to be lost, how much drugs do they have to be able to lose all of it by the time you get through the door or by the time you get in, if you knocked on the door and they didn't open it and you broke in after that, if you're at the right place to begin with? It's got to be a very, very small amount for them to actually be able to get rid of it. So, why are you there for that? And why are you there like you are for that small amount. If they have a huge amount, I read somewhere that if somebody commits a crime, they leave at least 6 or so, pieces of evidence around. There's no such thing as a perfect crime. You can't get rid of all of the evidence like that just because you knock on the door. So,
Well, and I guess another question too, just philosophically, is that you balance the need to preserve every point of evidence versus what you lose in terms of civil liberty or other things that can go wrong with the no knock, right? Every decision we make like this on policy is, what is the greater good? Is it the preserving of every last bit of evidence, or the unintended consequences? So I think those are fair discussions. I think those are the discussions we're having in the country right now in a new context.
I think
we're having
the civil liberties and the civil rights of a suspect is more important than all of your evidence or whatever evidence you're trying to get. A suspect is not a criminal; it's a person who's been suspected of crime.
All right, Reverend Russ Lee.
My prayer is that we do some legitimate changes, we do some foundational changes, we do some radical changes, so that we do not put ourselves, and we're never again in situation like we had in Minneapolis, that we don't have a similar situation with Yale police officers and Hamden police officers driving into New Haven and shooting at people, or shooting people, quite frankly. My prayer is that we take this seriously. And my prayer is that if this happens again, that the entire city does not burn down wherever it happens. That's my prayer.
Reverend Russ Lee, it is always an honor and a privilege to have time with you to chat about the issues in New Haven. Thank you for making the time. Dateline New Haven, and thank you for all your comments, which you sign with your full name in the Independent every day. They're among the proudest pieces I publish in the Independent. I also want to thank Harry Dross, our station manager, the miracle man behind the controls. And thank you to Eric and Babz and Jaywan and Rebecca, people weighing in, Bob, with comments in the show and adding so much. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long. WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.